All right, let's dive into a real Renaissance mystery. It's the story of a forgotten sage, a mysterious thinker whose ideas suddenly became more important than Plato himself. So picture this. It's 1463 in Florence, the absolute heart of the Italian Renaissance. A priceless manuscript, a long-lost collection of Plato's work, finally arrives. This is like the intellectual Super Bowl. But the city's ruler, the powerful Cosimo de' Medici, gives his top translator a shocking order. Put Plato on the shelf. Ignore him. He says, translate this first. So you have to wonder, what on earth could be more important than Plato? The answer was this name, Hermes Trismegistus. He was this almost mythical figure from ancient Egypt, believed to have lived around the same time as Moses. The texts were thought to hold this pure, original wisdom, a direct pipeline to the divine, that was even older than the great Greek philosophers. And just like that, a sage who'd been dismissed for centuries as a pagan idolater comes roaring back to life. But this comeback also kicked off a huge intellectual fight over his legacy, and that's where our story really gets going. Which brings us to the big question here. Who exactly was Hermes Trismegistus, and why did his ideas suddenly become so incredibly important to the thinkers of the 15th century? Well, to get that, you first have to understand the huge problem that they were all trying to solve. Let's call it the Renaissance dilemma. It was this high-stakes balancing act between the wisdom of the ancient world and the faith of their modern one. See, on one side, you have this incredible flood of rediscovered ancient pagan wisdom, these mind-blowing ideas from thinkers like Plato and, now, Hermes. But on the other side, you have the absolute foundation of their entire world, Christian faith and the doctrines of the Church. So here's the million-dollar question. How could these intellectuals embrace all this amazing ancient knowledge without being accused of heresy? How could they make these two worlds fit together? They needed a key, some kind of philosophical Rosetta Stone. And what they came up with was brilliant. They called it the Prisca Theologia, or ancient theology. The idea was that God had revealed one single universal truth to humanity, not just through the Jewish prophets, but also through a secret lineage of non-Jewish sages. And they argued this line started with Hermes, ran through figures like Plato, and that all of it was just perfectly setting the stage for Christian truth. All of a sudden, studying Hermes wasn't paganism. It was like uncovering God's hidden backstory for Christianity. And the master architect of this whole idea in Florence was a guy named Marsilio Ficino. His version of Hermes would become the respectable, philosophical sage for the city's elite. Now, Ficino was the ultimate insider. He was a philosopher and a priest, and he had the Medici family paying all his bills. His whole mission was to translate these ancient texts and weave them into this big, beautiful philosophy where Platonism and Christianity held hands. And his 1463 translation of the Hermetic texts was the book that kicked it all off. And this quote shows you his method perfectly. Ficino would take a concept like love from Plato and just dial it up to 11. For him, love wasn't just some human emotion. It was a cosmic force, a kind of spiritual gravity, pulling all of creation back towards God. He was fusing philosophy and theology into this incredibly sophisticated and spiritual worldview. So for Ficino, Hermes Trismegistus was the perfect ancient theologian. He was a wise philosopher whose ideas were a crucial step on the path to divine truth, a path that ended, of course, with Christ. Ficino made Hermes safe, scholarly, and respectable. But he wasn't the only one reading these texts. Because way down south in the Kingdom of Naples, a very different kind of thinker was at work, Lodovico Lazzarelli. And he saw a much more radical, much more prophetic version of Hermes. Lazzarelli was a totally different breed, more of a poet and a mystic. Working down in Naples, his mission wasn't just to philosophize. He wanted a direct personal path to God. He wasn't just mixing Hermes with Christianity. He was blending it with Jewish prophecy and hands-on mystical experience. You can feel that urgency in his work. And his influences were way more radical than Ficino's academic buddies. Lazzarelli was a follower of this guy, Giovanni Mercurio do Correggio, a wandering preacher who literally claimed to be a new messenger from God. We are not in the calm, scholarly world of Florence anymore. This is the world of prophecy, divine messengers, and world-changing revelations. And this quote really gets to the heart of Lazzarelli's approach. For him, these texts weren't just old philosophy you study. No, they were a practical guide, a how-to manual for achieving spiritual regeneration.
He saw Hermes not as some historical figure, but as a living prophet who held the keys to a direct, personal experience of God.
So let's just pause for a second. We have two guys, alive at the same time, reading the exact same ancient sage, but seeing two completely different figures. And right there, in that difference, we find the true spirit of the Renaissance.
Let's just break it down side by side. For Ficino in Florence, Hermes is an ancient philosopher. His approach is scholarly and theoretical. His goal is to reconcile these ideas with Christianity for an audience of elite intellectuals. Then you have Lazzarelli in Naples. For him, Hermes is a divine prophet. His approach is mystical and practical. His goal is to kickstart a new age of prophecy for an audience of true spiritual seekers. It's night and day.
And this gets to the heart of it. We always hear that the Renaissance was a rebirth of classical ideas, but that's not quite right. It wasn't a copy and paste job. It was a creative, messy, and brilliant remix. This spirit of blending, of syncretism, that's the real story. The goal wasn't just to revive old knowledge, it was to fuse it all together. They were grabbing ancient philosophy, Christian doctrine, Jewish mysticism, Hermetic magic, throwing it all in a blender to create something the world had never seen before. That process of creative blending, of remixing the past to invent the future, that is the true engine of the Renaissance. Ficino and Lazzarelli show us that the real power was in the synthesis. Their relentless drive to blend old wisdom with their current beliefs is what created their world. And that leaves us with a final thought, right? What powerful, seemingly contradictory ideas are we trying to remix in our own time? What new reality are we building from the wisdom of our past?